Hi guys and gals, Jackie at Famished Farm, and it's cold again here today. We got down to close to freezing, 35, somewhere in there. But I'm back in sweaters and long sleeves. I've been working out in the garden, so it's been 70, or close to 70. It's been very beautiful working outside. But this week our pantry challenge is we're still working on getting through our recipe stash, and we also find uses for nutritional yeast and texturized vegetable protein. So our 4 new recipes that we try this week were, first up, the best damn grilled pork chop recipe from Recipe Teacher. And this was good, but I'm still looking, because it was good, it wasn't great, a seasoning salt to sprinkle on pork chops before they're grilled. So this was good, but it wasn't Illinois Pork Producers seasoned salt good. That's what I'm working for. The second recipe is our crusty herb Dijon baked chicken quarters. And I happen to buy a 10-pound bag of chicken quarters, so we'll be looking for lots of recipes with them. This turned out very good. It will go in the rotation. It has some roasted vegetables. It's like a sheet pan dinner. So it has roasted vegetables. And after they're done cooking, you're supposed to take a tablespoon of red wine vinegar and drizzle it over. I didn't happen to have red wine vinegar, but I do have balsamic, and that turned out super good. Our Meatless Monday recipe that turned out to be on Meatless Wednesday was the best vegan Korean beef recipe. And now this was, I've never had Korean beef. I have all the ingredients, and it called for 2 cups of hydrated texturized vegetable protein, which I have a ton of, so I'm happy to use that. And this recipe, I did make another substitution that I'll talk about during the video, but it turned out delicious. My husband didn't even know it was using the TVP, but this will go on our Meatless Monday rotation. Excellent. And then our 4th recipe was using some of that nutritional yeast, and it was a homemade chicken bouillon, and it's nutritional yeast instead of any chicken base powder or anything like that. And this is going to be the base, part of a recipe coming up for next week. So we've got that made and it's ready to go. But those are our 4 recipes, and we're happy to cycle through nutritional yeast and texturized vegetable protein. And I think just being part of a pantry challenge, it makes you aware of what you have in your pantry and your refrigerator, freezer, and in my case, my canning shelves downstairs. It just keeps you constantly using those things that you know that maybe you've got a little too much of. So I found myself putting pickles out on the table, dill and chunk pickles, like bread and butter pickles, out on the table for dinners and lunches in some cases. And this week I tried to use some of that strawberry jelly that is runny in yogurt, and I might put it on some cottage cheese too. So it's just being aware, being mindful, and all of that is helping as we work toward minimizing our recipes. So stay tuned. We'll be back afterward with a recap. Okay, the recipeteacher.com recipe for the best damn grilled pork chops. And we're starting off with, it calls for 1 to 2 inch thick pork chops, and usually I get inch thick, but for some reason the thick pork chops today are only about a 1/2 inch thick. They're better when they're thicker. I think they retain the moisture on the grill better. So opt for at least 1 inch thick pork chops. And we're just going to towel off the extra juice from the pork chops. These have been thawing and sitting in the fridge for a little bit, so we do use several paper towels to towel them off. The recipe also calls for 4 bone-in chops. I just bought a package that only had 3. And usually the packages that I buy have 3, although they're smaller than these. So One of the things I will recommend is do the rub first before this step of putting the oil on the pork chops. I tell you, today I had to wash my hands a billion times from touching all the raw meat. So every time you see me step away, I'm washing my hands and then coming back. So just skip right to the rub. So we've got our brown sugar, and then we're going to have 2 teaspoons of paprika. And I do just a dash or 2 of salt. It calls for 2 teaspoons of salt. And then it also calls for 2 teaspoons of ground black pepper. And I had probably 1.5, 1 3/4. I just used what I had there. Next up is 2 teaspoons of ground mustard. And next up is our onion powder. And then it calls for garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon. You go light or heavy. I usually go a little light on the garlic powder. And the final ingredient is a tablespoon of vegetable oil that you're going to use to coat both sides of the pork chops before you put the rub on. I'm realizing I probably have enough extra rub, so I just save that in a shaker bottle for the next time I make chops. Here we are. We're just gonna try to divvy out enough for all of the chops and then turn them over, get some more oil, rub that in, and finish off with the rest of your dry rub. And this, of course, calls for going on the grill, medium-high heat for about 10 minutes. But we're not quite ready to grill them, so I'm just gonna put them in the fridge here till hubby is ready to grill. And next up is our crusty herb Dijon baked chicken quarters from FamilyStyleFood.com. And I am gonna slice up some onions, I'm gonna peel some carrots, and I'm peeling extra carrots because we use those at lunch every day, so I've got a few extra for lunch. That bucket there is my compost bucket, and then here I am portioning out some carrots for lunches. That copper thing was my compost bucket, and there's the little baggie for my lunch carrots. Cut these in 1/2-inch rounds. This is a sheet pan meal, so just keep them all about the same size so they cook evenly. And then I hadn't washed these carrots, so I'm gonna stick those in a colander and rinse those off quick. And the recipe does call for new potatoes. I just happen to have these russets on hand, so I'm just gonna use 2 nice size russets cut into roughly 1-inch pieces. And that onion, it's just gonna be sliced thick. It's going to pretty much stay the way it is. Then on your favorite sheet pan, I just have a Teflon liner on mine. We're just going to put all the veggies, kind of mix them up. And then we're going to add I add extra virgin olive oil. You add whatever you like. I kind of separate those onions up, and then the olive oil, and then I do salt and pepper and just mix them up nice. And here goes the carrots into the fridge. And our glaze for this chicken is olive oil and Dijon mustard. And the Dijon I have is toward the end of the package, so I added some water, so this Dijon will come out of there pretty quickly. 2 tablespoons, and then it also calls for either 2 teaspoons chopped fresh thyme or 1 teaspoon of dried. And we use probably about 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme. It's not my favorite seasoning. And then mix that up good. And then the same as for the pork chops, we're gonna use some paper towels and pat these dry before we put the glaze on. Lots of paper towels were harmed in the making of this video, I'm afraid to say. And while I'm checking this out, I noticed there is some extra fat on these. Fat and skin, so I'm grabbing my kitchen shears and we'll cut that off. And we're going to do that then to each of the 3 chicken quarters. If I said chicken breast, I apologize. Chicken quarters on this recipe. And don't forget there's always this little piece of fat on the outside there. Do that 3 times. And then when I'm done, I take all of those paper towels and put that in with the juices in the bottom of the bag. And I'm going to roll this up. And then, now I've washed my hands, guys. This is going to go into my freezer so it can await trash day. So back at our sheet pan, we're going to take each of these chicken quarters and season them. So salt and pepper as you like. We're usually heavy pepper and a little lighter salt. And then we're going to divvy out the glaze. Just spread it out between your chicken quarters on the skin side. And then we're going to nestle these skin side down onto the vegetables. And those vegetables, you'll remember, those are already seasoned with a little bit of oil. And then this is going to go into a 425-degree oven and bake for 20 minutes. And once the timer's set, then we'll come back here. This is 20 minutes have gone by, and all you're going to do is pull this out of the oven and flip those over until the skin side now gets crusty. And their cooking times, oops, don't drop your pan, Jack. The cooking time calls for 20 to 25 minutes. I can't remember now if that was accurate or not, but you'll know when. It will be crispy and beautiful golden brown when it's done. So back into the oven for that extra cooking time. So this was such a simple recipe with very simple, modest ingredients, but it was delicious. The smell, I wish you could smell it. It is fabulous. And now the only change I would make is, again, you'll notice there all the juices from the chicken. The vegetables have more or less steamed in those juices, and they have added fantastic flavor. But if you do prefer a crisper roasted vegetable, then definitely put your rack in here and get those vegetables up on a rack. I would still have the chicken sitting on top of them because, again, it imparts fabulous flavor. And the final touch, your red wine vinegar, or in my case, balsamic. Delicious. This recipe is from TikTok's The Boss Lady Kitchen OC. It's for homemade chicken bouillon, and I get to use a whole cup of my nutritional yeast. And then she calls for and is very adamant about using your best quality salt. In my case, I've got some Himalayan sea salt, but I'm going to cut that in half just to go for a lower sodium option on this homemade chicken bouillon. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of onion powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder. Then you'll add 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Go light if you prefer. I may go a little light there. 1 tablespoon of dried parsley. And this is my homegrown parsley that I dried last year. I had about a pint of dried parsley left from my plant. Then a teaspoon of dried oregano. 1 teaspoon of dried thyme, and again, thyme is a seasoning that we are just not a huge fan of, so I probably do closer to a 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme. And you will question, why does she have such a big bottle of thyme? It's a very good question. And then 1 teaspoon of basil, and we'll finish it off with 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric. And then I'm just going to use my whisk to mix this up a little bit before I throw the lid on the container, and then just shake it up. And because this is a recipe I'm not using until next week, I'm going to use a pint jar with a canning funnel and just save that for next week. you'll be surprised what I make. Our last recipe is from SusanCooksVegan.com, the best vegan Korean beef. No, we have never had Korean beef, but this recipe uses texturized vegetable protein, which I have a ton of, so that's me soaking it on the left side of the sink to get rid of the flavor. And then I'm getting my rice. This is just long grain rice that I'm rinsing. The recipe calls for basmati. Use whatever you prefer. As part of my deflavoring of my TVP, I do use a potato masher. Then I strain it, and we repeat the process with boiling hot water 2 more times. So a total of 3 times to get rid of the flavor. Over on the stovetop, I've started some water boiling, and we'll get our rice on and just cook that to your package instructions. On the island, I've got my vegetables that I'm going to prep. Just some onions. We're going to dice those. Calls for 1 onion. I use part of one and put the rest of that one away for later. On this cooktop, I'm going to ready a tablespoon rather, of olive oil, and then both of these are supposed to go into the pan. For some reason, I think the garlic is going to go into the sauce, but cook both your garlic and onions till the onions are translucent, and then add your garlic and just cook it till it's aromatic. On our sauce, this is about when I realized my mistake. This is the garlic going into the sauce, along with, it calls for 1 tablespoon of mirin, which I do not have currently. So I use a tablespoon of rice vinegar, to which I add 1 packet of stevia. And then this might be the only change I would make in the recipe next time. I've got it noted to try, oh, wait first. Here's where I discover the ginger. I was supposed to have 3 tablespoons of fresh grated ginger in the sauce, not the garlic. We'll make do. But back to that brown sugar. I might half that next time, go with a 1/4 cup and see how it does. We'll just make a couple notes till it's just the way we like it. This was really delicious though, so made as is, it's perfect. That was 1/3 cup of low sodium soy sauce. And then the recipe calls for a tablespoon of sesame oil. I use less than that, about a teaspoon. And then measure carefully on the liquid smoke if you're using it. It calls for just 1/2 teaspoon. And then I use just a couple dashes of cayenne pepper instead of the 1/2 teaspoon of dried chili flakes, and a little bit of pepper. Calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. I might use more than that. Oop, take a little back. It's still about 1/2 teaspoon. We like black pepper. And just mix this up. Back on the cooktop, the onions and supposedly the garlic are all ready to go. So I've added the TVP to the skillet, and it wants you to basically brown this TVP lightly. Here I am, the timer's gone off for the rice, so we'll put that off the heat and just put the cover back on it. But about browning the TVP, I didn't have a whole lot of luck browning it. Maybe it takes a lot longer. Your mileage may vary. And then here's our sauce, and I'm gonna grab a scraper because there was quite a bit of that sauce left in it. We get that all into the skillet and get that mixed up thoroughly. Now, they want you to saute this for quite a while and let the sauce caramelize and let the liquid absorb into the TVP. And I do remember thinking this did take quite a long time. I don't have how many minutes that was, but it does take a while for that to all get absorbed. You'll see there's quite a bit of liquid left in there. This recipe was really the surprise of the week. Rod and I both loved it, and it is going into the Meatless Monday rotation. It was absolutely delicious. I am just tasting it for flavors, and if I need to add anything, it was fantastic. A little sweet, but we ate every drop of it. It was great. This recipe from recipeteacher.com was good. It's just I've got in my mind a seasoning for pork chops that I'm trying to duplicate, and it's not quite there. But as made, I use probably less of the rub on my pork chops than the recipe called for. You'll remember I put a little bit of it to the side. These were very good, very flavorful. Again, use the full 1 to 2 inch thick pork chops. It'll be fabulous. And the crusty herb Dijon baked chicken quarters. Delicious, easy, simple ingredients, just prepared well. My only note is use a rack if you would like your vegetables to be crispier rather than steamed in the chicken juices. It was great, guys. Very good. This homemade chicken bouillon, I probably never would have made it, except I have that extra nutritional yeast that I'm trying to use up. So fabulous. I can try this for the recipe I'm going to be making next week. And this, you're going to have to kind of wait to see. I'll have to let you know how this is. I'll give you an update in next week's video. And the star this week, this best vegan Korean beef recipe, was really good. And I got to use texturized vegetable protein. And Rod didn't know what it was. He didn't know that it wasn't really beef. So, awesome. I did substitute the mirin. I used rice vinegar. And next time I make it, I am going to try to cut back on the brown sugar just because I'm diabetic. We liked it the way it was. We loved it the way it was. But always using less sugar is a good thing in our household. That's our new recipes for this week, guys. Please come back again, and thank you for watching.